Welcome to Ascend Leadership Monthly. This is the second to the last webinar of this series. It's been monthly all year long. And today we're talking about networking, but our conversation is not about tactics. It's about how we show up. Not taxes, tactics, strategies, social maneuvers, right? Apps. These are all important. There is no shortage of programs that you can learn or attend out there that tell you how to use these techniques. But you can have the best tactics in the world. You can actually get introductions and start seeing referrals come in, but they might not stick. They might not pay off in terms of referrals. And maybe that's because of how you're showing up in those relational spaces. Without an understanding of what's going on in the background, the narratives for you, and some of the different elements around things to consider when you're standing in the moment talking to somebody, you might not get the results you're aiming for. And as I've said throughout this series, I see leadership as more than the title. You don't have to have the title to be a leader. Leadership is something that is, I call, an outcome, because it's the impact we create. It's the trust we build. It's the understanding of how others experience us. And networking is the earliest moment where other people see who you are as a leader. So there's more to work in the room, right, than initiating conversations. And that's what we're talking about today. Let me get to my Q&A. It's empty, Jasmine. Is it supposed to be empty?
Well,
something
our
happening on my end.
attendees are just very shy, it looks like. I see a lot of folks who chimed in at the intro, and I put those under the published tab so that the audience can see them. But
sorry about little technical gaffes, okay, on my part. Back to the session, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Jana, yes. I am a CPA, and I was in practice as a practicing CPA for 26 years. 17 of those years I had my own firm. Now I'm a consultant, a speaker, and a trainer. And my work is centered on something that I call fearless inclusion. And I define that as the freedom to be yourself, or I should say the confidence to be yourself, and the ability to create space for others to do the same. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Now, I develop trainings and workshops focused on that inner work of leadership, authenticity, intentionality, crafting culture, conscious communications. Those are all the things we need to be successful at networking, not just successful as a leader. My passion is helping business professionals build deep connections, cultivate safety, and thrive as mindful, inclusive, and trusted leaders. So this series is built around the Ascend leadership model that I created to reframe how we think about leadership. Leadership is a full body experience, right? It's not just intellectual. It's not just the deployment of those fabulous skills and techniques that you've learned. You can know the best frameworks, have all the right systems, and still struggle as a leader, because you need those things, but you need more than that. That impact I was talking about, building that trust, that understanding of how others show up, that's what we're talking about here. What you see along the bottom, authenticity, self-leadership, connection, empowerment, navigation, and decisive action are the things that we need to master how we do those things, if that makes sense. So this is really about a mindset shift. I was about to say something bad there when I reorganized those letters. Mindset shift, right? Thinking about how we show up. And it's not like you turn your leadership on and off. So that's what we want to think about. So when we look at Ascend and we look at the pillars and we're talking about networking, what does this look like? So authenticity. This is really aligning your expression. And expression is how you show up. Expression isn't just words. It's all of the different elements of our communication. So how do you align that and get clarity around who you are so you're showing up to others as confident? Self-leadership is really around self-awareness. This is that social and relational intelligence so that others can experience you as level, steady, grounded, right? Connection. So this is built on your presence, not about performance, but how are you in those moments around helping others feel respected, feel valued? Empowerment. So are you approaching conversations with curiosity? Are you inviting contributions from the other person so they feel seen, feel heard? Navigation. Are you reading and understanding the context, adjusting your pacing, not going too fast, not going too slow? And I don't mean in the conversation, I mean in the relationship building, right? Are we thoughtful about how we are working to deepen our new relationships? And then decisive action is really around intentionality and follow up. You should be showing and need to be showing consistency because that's how we build the trust. So if you know me, I always start with a definition, right? Because it gives us a shared foundation because words mean different things to different people. So of course, I looked it up in the dictionary, and what you see here is the definition according to Merriam-Webster. And I get the idea that's trying to be expressed here, but to me, I don't feel like it captures it. It's almost too narrow, right? The exchange of information or services feels like phase 2 or part 2. It's an outcome of the actual start because networking starts the moment you meet somebody. So since there are other definitions, I decided to write my own. So this is what I wrote. The act of meeting people in professional or work-related settings to establish new connections with the potential for future relationship building. So that was my definition. So it's about meeting people. It's a professional context. You're coming in with an open mind. The idea is to see what the relationship might be. Now, there's an element of informality. I don't even know if that's a word. Informality, if you will, to networking. It's a cross between a casual interaction and a business interaction. These interactions are generally unscripted because I would hope so, right? I hope you're not saying, hi, it's so nice to meet, like, or trying to master the script. So it's unscripted. It's not exactly casual in the same way that a party is casual. There isn't necessarily an agenda, although there might be in some cases, right? And then there's intention behind them. The intention is really about awareness, that you are looking for opportunities to establish a new relationship. So even in social, fun, and entertaining venues, think at a conference and it's the evening get together, right? Music, dancing, party, drinks. Even then, the discussions are part of your professional world. You aren't there just to socialize and to have fun. You're there, and I mean that event, right? Because of your work, your role, or your professional goals. Now, earlier I said that this conversation isn't about tactics. And I said that because people hear the word networking, and that is often where things come to mind, like work in the room, going to that mixer or that reception, trying to get an introduction. So you reach out to person A to get introduced to person B, right? What we are picturing is the events, the people, the places. We're picturing environments where we do those things. But what we don't often think about is what's going on internally. So networking has this, intrinsic outward view. It's about them and me trying to get to know them or meet them or connect with them. So all of that, the things that we do to do that, to establish that first meeting point, that's what I mean by networking as a tactic. You're putting yourself in positions where you can get those introductions or that contact information. But that's only one layer. The other layer, as I mentioned, is what's happening inside. So when we are networking, doing all the things, we're showing up as our best professional self, sometimes consciously, but usually unconsciously. And I don't mean to say that it's performative, although there is some element of that. So the performative element ranges from being out there, right? Genuine, the just be yourself mindset, to the ultra performative, which is I'm showing up and it's the fake it as you make it, fake it till you make it mindset. And where you land on that spectrum will vary depending on the context or the type of the interaction. Now, so I was thinking about this. How do you plan a dinner party? So if you're planning a dinner party, you're thinking about food, decor, environment, music, light, I don't know, seating. You really want to create a space that's inviting. But if you don't think about how you want to show up in that space, the result might not be as welcoming as you intend. So for example, your guests might perceive you as being rushed or stressed or distracted. Now, let's say one of the people in the party is the date. of one of your friends, and you've never met this person. They're only meeting you for the first time at this party. What are they doing? They're quietly and probably unconsciously building an impression on what it might be like to be friends with you or to know you. Long after the party is over, what that person will remember about the evening is about how you made them feel, right? So the difference is about being engaged and connected during the party. It's being present. It's the difference between being busy, which is a good thing. Look, dinner parties are hard work, right? That's why I don't do them. It's the difference between being busy or being rushed. And rushed is not a good thing. This suggests you aren't prepared. And all of that is around how you mentally prepare, because it takes practice to host a dinner party. That's what I mean by, I should say, that's hosting as a practice, but this is an example of networking as a practice. And it means paying attention to and being mindful of that expression. How are you showing up? What is your demeanor and all of that? It's looking at that versus impression, like over focusing or getting in your mind how you want to be perceived. It's not an either or, it's actually creating alignment and balance between the two. Just looking at the Q&A, checking in. All right, so what do I mean by being present? If you Google it, because of course I did, right? If you Google it, you'll get things like put your phone away, turn off your notifications, don't multitask, maintain eye contact, right? You're going to see all of those things. And actually, those are pretty good things, right? But what those types of recommendations and suggestions do is they position being present as like the absence of distraction. So it's really surface level, it's behavioral. There's no internal orientation there. You might see presence defined or described as the ability to direct your attention to a specific purpose, right? But that makes it sound like it's a productivity skill. Sometimes it's mindfulness, and this is good. Mindfulness is part of being present. So that's really about what's happening and being aware of what's going on from within. But in terms of presence in a networking sense, that doesn't include the interaction with the other person. There are other things to think about. And these are all elements, but it's not what I mean specifically about being present, but these are things we need to be mindful of. So for example, there's executive presence, right? Think gravitas, poise under pressure. And then there's charisma. It's kind of similar, but this is about the effect you're having on others. Now, what's missing to me in all of these ideas is your intention, your energy, and your awareness. So it's the difference between flying on autopilot, as I like to say, or being right in there, really deeply engaged in that conversation. It's the difference between talking, putting out all your words, right? And actually listening to understand and connect, to get a sense of what the other person is feeling as they're expressing and sharing things to you. It's the difference between managing a dinner party and enjoying the dinner party. So let's walk through these. The first is alignment. This is what the don't be distracted, recommendation means. It means giving your full attention to the moment you're in, to the relationship, and being in relationship with what is happening around you. It sounds simple, but it's not. I mean, have you ever been to a networking event? You get introduced to someone, and next thing you know, your mind is running the what, where, what is the benefit to me of this personal relationship sort of calculations. And so you've immediately become distracted. Number 2, awareness. So this is really paying attention to how you're responding to in the moment, because we're not necessarily good at this, right? I'm not saying to notice how you're responding so that you can do something about it. But until you notice what's happening within you, you might not understand how it's affecting the impression you're trying to make. Are you getting defensive, right? Have you a little bit checked out doing those calculations I mentioned a minute ago? Is the music bothering you? Is it too loud and you're missing some of what the other person is saying? So you're struggling really hard to pretend like you've got it all. all kinds of things happen. Like, are you hungry? So checking in with all of these things internally will allow you to pivot, adjust, and shift how you're showing up. Number 3 is active listening. This is the one I mentioned already. Too often, we're listening to respond, or worse, we're waiting for the other person to stop talking so we can talk, right? And we are especially primed to do this when we're meeting somebody, particularly in an environment designed for you to meet somebody, a networking event, right? So this is about being focused enough to really hear the other person. If you're trying to learn about them, try to flip into curiosity. That can help you not get distracted. Okay, 4, intention. And I mentioned a moment ago that there isn't always an agenda, but there is intention. So this is being mindful of what we are saying, including all the nonverbal communication, right? This is what will convey that meaning, your warmth, your tone, what kinds of questions you're answering. Do you create sort of like a welcoming space around you? We don't want to be reactive, especially if we aren't clear of what we're reacting to. So this is why we need to be aware and thoughtful. You have to be aligned, number 1, aware, number 2, and listening, number 3, in order to be responsive in a way that helps create that warmth, that tone in that environment. And then 5, attention. When you're doing all of these other 4 things, it will create a space for you to make people comfortable. So it's paying attention to the person, yes. It's paying attention to the environment, yes. It's paying attention to how you came together and what other factors might be involved there. It's being mindful of that, because all of that will shift the context. If you meet person A in one scenario, I should say, listen, if you meet Joe in scenario A, or you meet Joe in scenario B, that interaction will likely be different if you are being present in the moment and thinking of all of these things. Now, when I used the word performative a moment ago, I was talking about what version of ourselves, we bring to the networking. And the range was just be yourself to fake it until you make it, right? But of course, it's a little more nuanced than that. What I'm really talking about here is authenticity and how comfortable we feel revealing different parts of ourselves. Now, when you meet someone for the first time, intuitively, and we all do this, we adapt our behavior, right? And when we're networking, we will bring to this moment an intentional version of ourselves, because we have lots of selves, right? You have the professional self, the public self, the private self, the wow, you know me really well self. And then there's the initial meeting self, or it makes any sense. So when we're networking, right, the stakes of those initial meetings can feel a little higher. So we will present a version of ourselves that we think will land well and that will align with the other person's expectations. So we're operating from a place that I call curating or curated identity. So we're part authentic and we're part performative. It's when the scale tips too far to the performative side, we end up in what I call presentation mode. So there's always some degree of this curation. Each setting has different norms, what's appropriate to share, to wear. Should you be formal? Do sessions like this call for brevity? So we need to understand all of these things and adapt. And for most of us, these adaptations, these types of curation that I'm talking about, this is not about deception. To be clear, it's that instinctive and automatic thing that we do. It's the same adaptive skill, if you will, that we apply to how we shift when we're talking to our boss, we're talking to our peer or a colleague, right? We're talking to the kids. We always naturally adapt. This is a question of awareness as we navigate the context. It's being socially aware, it's being relationally aware, and it requires emotional intelligence. But shifting out of presentation mode is how we can start to get more real, not to over-reveal, but to just be more present. So what are these? The first one is the behavioral side. So this is thinking about the habits, the tendencies, and the little ways that you're trying to manage how you're perceived. There's the relational side. So these are the cues we're reading, the expectations that we're navigating, the social norms that we're responding to. Ensuring, are we reading all of those well? There's the presence side, the things we just talked about, right? Attention, self-awareness, listening, etc. And then there's the alignment. And this is perhaps the most important. That's the curation piece. So shifting out of presentation mode means being an aligned version of yourself. Curated, yes. Contorted, no. Intentional, yes. Performative, maybe, but not to the point of, self-erasure, if that makes sense. So,
Shana, I just wanted to butt in. There was a question Natalie submitted, and I think you just answered that question kind of for her. She's actually submitted another as well, follow-up question. But her initial question was about the difference between intention and agenda and drawing that line. And I think you just very eloquently answered it, even if you didn't see the question. But I did want to highlight that. And then her second question as well, which I just put over in priority for you.
Okay, these are good questions. So let's go back to the first one, between intention and agenda. So thank you for bringing that up. So an agenda means you are out to get something. Now, to be fair, if you're at a networking event, you might be out, you might have this strategy of, I want to meet 10 new people, right? So you have an agenda that's spurring you on and that's driving you. That can feel absolutely performative, and it can ring disingenuous. Why am I having trouble? English is my first language.
Disingenuine. It's a tongue twister.
That sounds right. Intention is, why are you here? What are you trying to achieve? And what you're trying to do is make a connection to start a relationship. Not because you're out for something, but it is simply to create those opportunities. So that's what I mean by intention versus agenda. And then the other question, folks, is if you had a negative experience during networking, how do you make sure your past doesn't influence the present and the future? So, Nicole, I will tell you a story later on about exactly something that happened to me. So don't mark that one cleared yet, Jasmine. I want to make sure I come back to that.
Got it.
Yay. So let's talk about, though, authenticity. So I think it's a bit of a myth and it's misunderstood. Like, authenticity means unfiltered. You can say whatever comes to mind without consideration because, I'm being my authentic self. No, right? The reality is a little more nuanced. It balances honesty and openness with empathy and situational awareness. So it's not like you're hiding the things that make you unique. We're not talking about that. We want you to be true to yourself. Now, the other problem with authenticity is that we act like it's something we can see. We'll know it when we see it, right? Well, I can't look at you and see that you are or are not being authentic, right? It isn't for someone else to decide what authentic looks like for me. So we want to be careful when we're thinking about being authentic. It's really about you being understanding and, checking in that you're being genuine and that you're not pretending to be something you're not. So when it comes to networking, though, the goal is not to be fully yourself, right? We are curating our identity to match the moment. So that's unrealistic to be fully yourself in the way that some people think about it. This does not mean you're being fake, right? It's that social intelligence I was talking about. When you first meet someone, the goal is that connection. The goal is not to unload everything about you. We'll talk about, what if you struggle with confidence or you feel a sense of imposter syndrome. That might be what you feel like you need to do to make that connection. I'll get into that here in a little bit. But what we are likely trying to do, if we are talking about being authentic, what we sometimes try to do is manage the impression. But the truth is, you can't control somebody else's impression of you. What we can control is how we show up, aiming for that alignment between values and intention and expression. Now, I like this quote, and particularly the last part, because this speaks to the idea of the risks of being too authentic. I'm not sure that's the right way to describe it, but that's kind of the way I think about it. What this quote says to me is that authenticity is about balance. It's not a matter of the volume of disclosure, right? So that balance is somewhere between too little sharing of yourself and showing who you are can come across as distant, guarded, or inauthentic. Okay, disingenuous. Too much sharing can feel out of place. It could be overwhelming to the other person, and it might actually make them less inclined to continue a relationship. So it's that balance. Now, there's this great article. It's down here in the bottom left. Be yourself, but carefully. It's an article from 2013 in Harvard Business Review. And what it talks about is a 5-step way to ensure and to build and be comfortable with authenticity. And what they do is this, so there's this process where each builds on the next, starting with being self-aware, having a sense of who you are, understanding how you're perceived. This is the foundation for everything else. The second step is making sure that what you're sharing is relevant to the work involved, right? The goal of revealing more of yourself is to build trust, is to improve teamwork, to boost collaboration. It's not to make friends. This is work. Although friendships tend to develop at work, but that's not your original goal as you start working through how much do you want to show yourself. The third is, please don't exaggerate or make up stories to fit the situation. That's like you're trying to force it. And that can ring inauthentic, right? And it can feel unnatural. And here's the thing. People can probably figure out the little white lies or the exaggerations, and we don't want that. That's going to undermine our reputation. 4, pay attention to the norms around the event, this organization, that club, this office, the client, wherever we're meeting new people, because it's not about bending to fit in, if you will. It's about understanding what is needed from you to create that balance in this space. That's the curation piece I was talking about. And then number 5, sharing too much too quickly can make you feel or appear awkward, needy, or even unstable. Actually, I was thinking about a word earlier, like common vernacular, you seem thirsty, right? Like, and that's not how we want to be. So it's very important that we pay attention to that. So what is it that's holding us back, if you will, from revealing more of ourselves, for getting stuck in our head? This is just a few. So confidence, right? These are several factors. Well, let me back up. What these factors do is they impact the internal narratives in our head, right? And those narratives, they aren't necessarily bad. They can be uplifting. They can be self-affirming. They can help give you clarity. However, some of those internal narratives can also hold us back to the point where we're hiding, right? When curation becomes so disconnected from who you are to the point where the version you're presenting strays from your values, your sense of agency, your truth, if you will, this is when curation becomes inauthentic, because we're shifting into self-protection mode and out of thoughtful and intentional self-expression, right? So the narratives are what start to move us away from openness and into, I was going to say shrinkingness, but again, not a word. So confidence. Confidence does things like reduces overthinking. It allows us to be natural in the way we express ourselves. Imposter syndrome can lead to self-monitoring and shrinking. Self-awareness. This influences the filters that we are using to read the room, like that social intelligence, shaping our understanding of others and ourselves, as well as possibly how they are, the impression you're making on them. That's what I talked about. So I have confidence, imposter syndrome, and self-awareness. Those are three, and I could have put a lot others on the here, but I really wanted to stay focused. But things, for example, like judgment. None of judgment, if we are afraid of being judged in some way or somehow, that's going to shut us down and move us toward performative. If we have a false sense of confidence, it might move us into being too open, and we're not understanding why we seem to be turning people away, right? We meet a lot of great people, but it doesn't lead to any new, meaningful, lasting relationships. When we think of networking, right, at its most basic form, it is me wanting to meet you, getting to know you. Now, what do we know might likely happen? Somewhere down the contact line, we have a shared connection. I mean, isn't that what LinkedIn is all about? Who's your first connection? Who's your second connection? But what we're really trying to do with networking is create a new dot. Actually, let me go back to this slide. So over here on the left, that strong social ties piece here, this is what effective networking can bring us. I keep adding new dots to this web of connection, right? That's my real network. But look on the right. I have a whole bunch of dots, but they're not connected to anything. They're only just me. And that's not what we're trying to do with networking. And so to do that requires us to be paying attention and not be afraid of things, like I said, the judgment, etc. So confidence. This is the definition according to the dictionary. Confidence is a belief in yourself, the conviction that you have the ability to meet life's challenges and to succeed, and the willingness to act accordingly. Now, so confidence, this will influence the way we show up, the curation of your identity, if you will. When we are confident, we are more expressive. We are open, right? We listen. When we are not confident, we are protective. And so we're leading to from a mindset of performance. We are less present in the moment, and we're just busy trying to show up the way we think we're supposed to show up, right? So it directly affects how we express ourselves. So if we're not confident, you're going to second guess yourself. Oh, wow, is that the right word? I'm going to be monitoring the reactions of others and maybe even being hypersensitive, if you will, to them. I might be seeking approval. And this is going to, again, we're doubling down now on performance rather than presence. It also does affect how you read those social cues. So for example, if you're not feeling confident, you might distort some of the signals that are coming in. So if somebody has just a neutral expression, right, you might feel like you're being judged. Or have you ever been in a conversation where you might have said something, they respond, and then there kind of is this quiet moment? It feels like, oh, I know, judgment, right? Like that's what might happen when you don't feel confident. So confidence allows us to show up and share our perspective. We're warm, we're curious, we have a sense of humor, there's a natural cadence to the way we're talking. And, if something comes up that feels a little weird or awkward or off-putting, we can take it on the chin. We can pivot, we can do all of those things without losing our composure. When we're networking, confidence then is how we stay focused so we can build those connections and get to know somebody versus evaluating them, right? Rating them, categorizing them, identifying like, where do I put them in my web of the people that I know? The other piece that I had up there was imposter syndrome. And basically, so you can read the whole definition, but basically this is you feel like a fraud, even though all the evidence out there says you are not, but internally you feel that way. We're assuming we know less than other people. Oops, sorry. We're assuming, why am I moving the slides? We're assuming you know less than other people when the reality is you know just as much, maybe even more. So what happens? If you have imposter syndrome, you might credit your success to other things like I was in the right place at the right time, or, I wouldn't have been successful except for the help that somebody gave me. Uh, it came so easy to me that it couldn't have been hard. So, it really isn't a reflection of my skill. Now, when you're networking, what happens then is you start to question if you should belong here. Are you really qualified? Do I have anything to add here? What might happen then? You over explain. Like you're rehearsing the things in your brain so you can say the smart thing, say the right thing, right? Overcompensating, if you will. So we do all of those things. We downplay our accomplishments. We find it difficult to accept a compliment, right? And we stick to things we think are safe. So we don't take those interpersonal relational risks that are important in networking because you have to initiate conversations. You have to be comfortable asking questions. You have to be comfortable sharing something about yourself and, comfortable with those quiet pauses, as I said. If you suffer from or struggle with imposter syndrome, all of those things feel high stakes. Now, self-awareness. I love this grid. It's a 2x2 chart that maps internal self-awareness, how well you know yourself, and external self-awareness, how well you understand how others perceive you. Looking at something like this helps you identify your archetype so that you can better understand how you're showing up. So, for example, top left, introspectors, yeah. So they're clear on who they are, but they might struggle to get feedback from others. So if you're networking and you don't have a high degree of either types of self-awareness, you might struggle because another person gets this, impression that you're self-absorbed. You're not reading the room. Seekers, that's the one below that. They don't know who they are or how they come across. And so this could give somebody the impression that they are stuck or frustrated, they're aloof, right? Pleasers, the one over here to the right. They're more focused on appearance. They are doubling down on being performative. And if they're not careful, they might be perceived as weak, a pushover, insecure. So awareness, that's what we're seeking, a balanced sense of yourself as well as how others understand you. This can give someone the impression you're confident, you're curious, and you're open. That means they're going to want to talk to you, right? Now, authenticity, the curation of awareness and intention, this effective networking requires us to adapt. And so there are a couple of different things that affect us in the environment and why we make some of those shifts. So the first is context. That's understanding the norms, expectations, and culture of an event. I mean, if you've been to multiple conferences, for example, they all have a different feel and vibe, and you might actually show up a little bit differently, right? What we're trying to do is maintain an alignment with our values, but adapting to the situation. Social categorization. What do I mean by that? Well, that's some of those filters that I'm talking about. Those are the assumptions and the perceptions that we make that influence our tone and our openness. We want to be mindful of that. Social categorization, it does influence the way that we connect with others. So, for example, how you show up with, or you're getting introduced to a new colleague and they're at a peer level, same event, right? Same circumstance, but now you're meeting an executive from one of your new clients. The stakes have changed. And so that's going to affect the way we show up and the assumptions we're making about the other person. Boundaries help us calibrate. We just looked at boundaries. It means you're clear on your own boundaries as well as picking up on the cues and the signals of the other person to respect their boundaries. There's no right or wrong here. This is about what feels right or feels wrong and paying attention to those internal messages, not following what you think is like a rule. And from a boundaries perspective, when you're networking, this is a balance between what you feel comfortable with and what they feel comfortable with. And so it's trying to make sure you're understanding and navigating those fairly and appropriately. And then pacing is about the timing and the nature of your communication. So at the initial meeting, you might be pausing, right? Appearing to be or actually be thoughtful. You might be curious. But after that, it's the frequency and the method that you use to build a relationship. If you come on too strong, you can push people away. If you are too slow to follow up, they might not take you seriously, right? So pacing is important, and that's going to vary person to person, relationship to relationship. Now, so pacing is really about that progression that I was just talking about. And we show up differently through each of them. So phase one, meet and greet, right? This is the first point of contact. We present that version of ourselves that I said we think aligns with the other person's expectations. This is solely based on first impressions. So some of the things you might have heard in terms of tactics and techniques, like we mirror the other person's energy. We look for something we have in common. So we're doing some of those things so that we can create the connection. Just because you met somebody doesn't mean you're connected yet. What you're trying to do is establish that so that you can build, hopefully, a relationship. Now, phase two, is building that familiarity. So once that connection is made, the emphasis now shifts to staying in touch, building that familiarity. It means we start to share more, we open up, we show our values, we show our personality, right? We are a little bit more open naturally over time, and we're going to find a cadence of communicating with this person. That's important. And it's based on the energy of the relationship. And then the third one is deepening the connection, right? So over time, this person becomes firmly part of your professional network. So here the emphasis shifts again. We're no longer casual because it's an established relationship. We are no longer in networking mode. So you can be fully open and you can take more of those relational risks. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're deepening and strengthening trust. That is when you start to get the referrals. That is when you start to get the introductions, right? So I said at the very beginning, networking, those first moments, like I said, in the dinner party, you're building the impression of what it's like to be friends with you. Same is true here. In your networking from the very beginning, people are going to view you through the lens of what it's going to feel like to work with you. And as a leader, it's going to be what it feels like to work for you. So this isn't just the title. So we have to be particularly mindful as leaders, because how we make them feel in that first moment, right, will inform how we might make them feel in this organization. Do they feel invisible? Do they feel dismissed? Do you do something like, oh, they're beneath me, or somehow send that signal? So that's something we need to think about. So how does this all tie in then everything what we've been saying? Authenticity. This is letting people see the real you, not unfiltered, but only to a point, right? So that's being mindful of that for you. Self-leadership. This is staying present. This is that emotional reactivity. This is being socially intelligent. Connection. This means listening to the other person, showing them that you are genuinely interested in them and wanting to learn more. Empowerment is about making sure they feel heard. None of us want to be ignored. So how do we make them? Can't make them. What are we doing so that they feel heard? Navigation is showing up more of yourself as that relationship deepens, when we go from that initial introduction all the way from the meet and greet to the familiarity and the deepening connection. And then decisive action is really about how do you build that trust by following up consistently and managing those communications, not just the frequency, but the method. Email, phone call, texting, LinkedIn, social media tag, it's all of those things. It's a lot today. So I wanted to give you a couple of scenarios before we wrap up about what this might look like. All right. So imposter syndrome, for me, the example I came up with is you walk in the room, right? You don't know anyone. And now you're wondering, why am I here? I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here. You start to overthink everything you say because you want to prove yourself, right? So this is where you might try something like reframing. And instead of worrying about what value am I going to offer, maybe try to reframe it as, what can I learn? Who am I here to meet? So it's not about me. It's about it's about you and getting to know you. Now, authenticity and boundaries down here on the bottom left. This is where you might feel like you need to overshare, or you need to undershare because you're trying to manage that impression. You want them to see you as authentic. But remember, We can't tell when somebody's being authentic. It's hard, but we can tell when somebody's ringing inauthentic, or we can get that sense. Now, alignment in the top right, the blue one here. This is your energy doesn't match the moment, right? So you feel the need to perform. So you start introducing yourself in a way that is rehearsed, right? You're nodding in the conversation, though you're not really connected to the conversation. Who's done that? You're jumping way too fast. This pacing, you jump in way too fast and you're being like too open and sharing. And that can actually undermine trust and make people uncomfortable. So what I was saying earlier, Nicole, you had asked that question about past experiences. So two of mine experiences. The first one, imposter syndrome. So this was when I started my practice. I joined the Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce probably a couple years after I started my practice, not right away. And I went to my very first networking event, a big networking event that I'd ever gone to when I started my firm. And I was a new member at the chamber. And I say imposter syndrome because I can tell you I was stressed. I didn't feel confident. I didn't even think, what was I thinking? You know, I don't belong here. I am not good enough, blank enough, smart enough to be here. So what did I do? My strategy was, okay, Jana, I'm going to hire, you've been hired as an actress, and the actress has been hired to play the role of a confident businesswoman, right? I distinctly remember I walked up to the door of the hotel and I go, and action, right? And then I walked in. And what that did was it gave me permission to do things that I otherwise might not have done. And it actually worked as a great technique. And what it taught me was that I do know what everybody else knows. I know some things that you don't know. You know things that I don't know. That's okay, right? That's called the world. And it also showed me that it's safe to do this. Some of that relational risk taking didn't feel as risky, right? So Nicole, to your question, if that had been a negative experience, then one of the things I might have tried is reframing that the way I said a moment ago, which is curiosity. So I will come into this next networking event and all I want to do is meet one person and learn something about them. Like very low bar so that you can gradually feel more comfortable again. Because it depends, Nicole, on what that experience was and how it'll influence you. The other one I wanted to share was here being out of alignment, right? So I remember when it was called the AIT, the Practitioner Symposium, it's been a minute. And they had the soul owner retreat. They had a couple of things like that. So I went to that. I was the youngest person in the room. And there were only a handful of people of color and mostly men. There were a lot of women, but it was mostly men. So it seemed to me like everyone had everything figured out. They were sharing stories, and it didn't feel to me like they were sharing challenges and solutions. I was absolutely intimidated. And I remember that feeling. So what did I do? I let the other person set the pace. I did the mirroring thing, and I only talked about things that I felt confident about, what I thought was safe. And so there are times I know I've adopted these techniques and I'm learning now, what can I do so that I don't feel the need to do these things again? It's not to say it won't happen. It's that awareness that I'm talking about. So a couple more thoughts I thought I'd leave you with. It's okay to just stand there. My husband and I, when we were talking about this earlier this week, he was saying how the first thing that came to his mind was imagining a big room. He said, I could see him standing right in the middle of the crowd. Now, he said, you're going to need a prop. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I don't know, like a drink. And you have to have something in your hand, so you're not just standing there, right? And he said, it's really about paying attention, getting a sense of the vibe, and who knows, maybe somebody's going to come up to you, right? Genuine curiosity. If you start to be curious, what your brain does is it starts to puzzle things and figure things out. It turns off judgment. It dampens out, if not quiets down, some of those negative internal narratives. Too often people think that when you meet somebody, there's got to be a reason. You can't meet them for meeting's sake. And I would argue that, yes, you can. Not every person you meet needs to have a value or classification in your network. You never know who you're going to meet, right? And sometimes it's okay if you don't have the bandwidth to make the effort. It's important for you to attend the event, maybe, but it's okay if what you walk away from is an understanding of the environment, the culture, right? You don't necessarily have to make a lot of effort. Just be polite, say hi, and be conversational if somebody approaches you. And yes, that's good networking, right? Here I wrote the second question is just as important as the conversation starter. And I say that because a lot of people think I have to have an opening question, right? So they genuinely ask the same or some similar opening question, but they're not necessarily prepared for the response. And so that's what I'm talking about is being prepared or ready for that response. And then the last one I already mentioned, this is social media. Be careful how you use social media because you can use it too much or you can use it not enough and still send the same signals and misunderstandings as you would in person. The quicking, the overshare or the undershare, too much or too little on social, sometimes that can have that same effect. So at the end of the day, what has this all been about then? It's noticing what version of you are bringing into those moments, those new interactions, and doing so with intention. Now I see that most of the questions have been answered. Is there anything else, Jasmine, that's come in? Most of
one just came over.
Let's see. The comment about action when you were nervous is awesome. I'm saving that forever. Oh, thank you. I don't even know where that came up with, but I know that I have this tendency to, well, I have a high degree of social anxiety. So put me on a stage, I'll talk to 2,000 people, fine. Put me in a room when I have to go up and meet strangers one-on-one, and I struggle with that. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And so trying to find some strategies that can help you, that's the key. And I will tell you, I still use that strategy. I do. So before we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody, this has been a year-long series. I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it, and we have one more session. Registration isn't open yet, but it should be opening soon. You can sign up on my website for a notification when registration opens. And we're talking about your leadership brand. Like, how do we bring everything together that we've talked about this year? And what does it mean for how you are perceived? It's about awareness and it's about intention there as well. So with that, I will say thank you for joining me. If there aren't any other questions, Jasmine, back to you.